I want to bring in Francis Ngannou. Francis, for coming here, ESPN.
Is this your next fight?
I'm the boxing heavyweight champion, UFC heavyweight champion. He's in great shape. Look at the muscles on him.
And we're going to find out who is the baddest on the planet.
Good man, Francis.
Damn, it happened. No one could believe it until the end, but the UFC fugitive heavyweight champion Francis Ngannou managed to secure a fight with one of the best heavyweight boxers, Tyson Fury. Their potential matchup gained hype over a year ago and seemed nothing more than a joke, but the situation has changed 180 degrees, and on October the 28th at the tournament in Saudi Arabia, these guys will share the ring. But will this fight be exciting for the audience or even competitive? Today's video will be dedicated to Fury versus Ngannou's fight, and I will tell you why this fight will not be competitive. Please don't forget to like and comment with 4 words, and also subscribe to never miss new videos. And let's get started. How it all started. All this commotion was initially stirred up by Fury himself back in 2021. If you haven't noticed, the Brit is always fond of creating a lot of noise out of nothing, and this time he decided to venture into another sport by challenging the muscle man Francis Ngannou. The Cameroonian recently avenged his embarrassing defeat against Stipe Miocic and finally claimed the heavyweight champion title. I'm 100% certain that Fury had no plans for any fights against Ngannou, but the idea appealed to Francis so much that he couldn't let go of it. It obsessively pursued the heavyweight and became a stumbling block in his negotiations with the UFC. Ngannou wanted more money, more than what was offered in the league. In the negotiations, he took the position of the side that dictates the terms, while the heads of the company offered him serious fees to get rid of the fixed idea and stay as the champion. But Francis couldn't be stopped anymore. In early 2022, he had his first title defense and defeated his former teammate Cyril Gane, after which negotiations with the UFC deteriorated even further. According to media reports, Ngannou was offered $8 million for a fight against the greatest MMA fighter of all time, Jon Jones, but Francis refused even such a tempting offer. Meanwhile, Fury continued to stay in the limelight and trouble Ngannou's mind with statements about a potential showdown. After his victory over Chisora, he even invited Francis into the ring where they agreed to fight, but later announced his retirement at a press conference. Everyone understood that the Gypsy King was simply leading the Predator on, but Ngannou continued to wait and hope, and in January 2023, he announced that he had terminated his contract with the promotion and was going into free agency. The Brit immediately reacted. A month before that, Tyson returned from retirement and had his third fight with Chisora, but there were no more loud challenges directed at Ngannou. Fury was feeding the guy breakfast, but without any specifics. At some point, it seemed like he was just mocking him. Other boxers also joined the commotion, and on paper, all of them agreed to fight Ngannou, but no one really intended to face the Predator. It had been a couple of months since the champion left the top MMA league, and people had started to gradually forget about him when suddenly Francis announced signing with the PFL promotion, where in addition to a fight contract, he was given the opportunity to promote the still unformed PFL Africa body. Against the backdrop of news that Ngannou was struggling and not being picked up by any league, this signing looked cheerful. But again, there was no word about a fight with Tyson. Moreover, the Gypsy King was heading towards a title showdown with Alexander Usyk. At stake for the first time in years was the undisputed heavyweight world championship, and stylistically, Fury had everything to dismantle the Ukrainian, but he decided to mess around and make outrageous demands to the champion's team. It reached a point where Usyk's team simply couldn't stomach Tyson's audacious conditions and refused to fight. Fury had played around with Usyk, and it was unclear what he wanted to do next. But then the unexpected response came. The Brit agreed to fight Ngannou.
Francis Ngannou, Big Mush, I'm your daddy. I'm the daddy, me. I'm the baddest man on the planet, and I'll give you the best hiding you've ever had, you big dosser. Sign the contract, you big stiff idiot.
Francis's sweet dream became a reality, and now he, as he had always dreamed, would be able to test himself in boxing against one of the best guys in the business. Now you know the whole story of this conflict, and we can finally assess the chances of the UFC champion realistically. Why the fight will be non-competitive. Now let's talk about the rules. When Ngannou was still in the UFC, Fury mentioned some hybrid rules like fighting with smaller gloves or using a cage instead of a ring.
Francis Ngannou, I know you're out of contract with the UFC. You want to earn some big boy money? Come see the Gypsy King and let's do a big fight for the baddest MF on the planet. And let's kick it up spicy in a cage, 4-ounce gloves, under Queensberry, and let's have a badass referee like Iron Mike Tyson.
Naturally, all of that turned out to be nonsense. When serious discussions about a potential Fury versus Ngannou meeting started, it was assumed that we would witness an exhibition fight, and that would be terrible. Absurd rules where decision victory is impossible, no judges, unknown round length and quantity. If it had gone that way, the matchup would have lost a lion's share of its interest. But now we can rest assured because the fight has officially acquired professional status. Everything will proceed in standard mode with normal round length and 3 judges. Although the number of rounds is still unknown, I believe there won't be more than 10. But that's not so important because it's highly likely that it would end much earlier than it may initially seem. So why would the fight still be non-competitive? After all, Francis Ngannou was the former UFC heavyweight champion and his renowned power was talked about as much as Deontay Wilder's bombs. Can't he land a solid shot on Fury and knock him out within half an hour? No, he can't. Believe me. It's no secret that striking techniques in boxing and MMA differ significantly. Mixed martial artists need to develop 10 different aspects equally, while boxers focus solely on their handwork, resulting in incomparable levels of skill. Yes, the Predator has power, and he knocked out almost every one of his opponents in the UFC, but hasn't Tyson fought against powerful guys like Wilder? There's an interesting parallel between Deontay and the Predator, since they have a somewhat similar style. At the same time, it's undeniable that Wilder's power is at least on par with his MMA colleague, especially because he drops people just as heavily with much softer gloves. Even one of Ngannou's sparring partners claimed in an interview that the levels of power between Deontay and Francis are simply incomparable and the Bronze Bomber's punch is several times more dangerous. Why would that guy lie to anyone? So now the question arises, if Fury was able to withstand the pressure and punches from Wilder, why wouldn't he withstand Ngannou? Deontay might have knocked down Tyson, but he couldn't figure out how to finish the champion despite having several opportunities. Additionally, it's crucial to consider that Ngannou won't be in the gloves he's accustomed to. This significant difference must be taken by Conor McGregor. In MMA, he was a fearsome puncher, not on the same level as Ngannou of course, but his timing and counter-striking strength were legendary. But what happened when the Irishman faced Floyd Mayweather? The boxing legend simply didn't feel McGregor's punches and took them with a calm face only to respond with much more powerful shots. It's quite possible that the same will happen with the Cameroonian Wrecking Machine. Alright, even if by some miracle Francis retains his knockout power in his fists, you should understand that Wilder is still 10 times more technically skilled than Ngannou. Just take a look at the highlights of the Predator from the UFC. Either knockouts or wild brawls that a technician like Fury with his defensive ability and footwork would easily avoid. The only fight where Francis showed good boxing skills was the rematch with Miocic, but again, it was good for a UFC fighter, not on the level of a professional in another sport. Moreover, I really want to talk about Ngannou's recent MMA performance since it raised just as many questions. In his title defense, the Cameroonian faced Cyril Gane, who became a breakthrough in terms of striking for the entire heavyweight roster. No one could have imagined that heavyweights in MMA could be so mobile and effectively use feints. If we speak bluntly, Gane is a stripped-down version of Alexander Usyk in terms of range work and footwork. It was hard for fans to imagine how Ngannou, with his technique, would fare against such an uncomfortable stylistic opponent. But Francis surprised and won taking 3 rounds out of 5. However, the question arises, how did he win them? Through wrestling. Yes, the Predator simply did something he had never done before and transformed from a profile knockout artist into a wrestler with powerful takedowns. Ngannou was thrown off by this and couldn't get back on track. Additionally, the champion was physically stronger and easily controlled the challenger on the canvas. Looking at that fight, I have to ask, how does Ngannou plan to defeat Fury? Even in his own sport, there was a guy who effortlessly outstruck him and evaded all his power shots by several meters. What will happen in boxing, where he can no longer switch gears abruptly and become a wrestler? It will be a brutal beating, a very harsh one. In an interview after his victory, Ngannou justified his striking shortcomings by claiming he had a knee injury, which was also supported by specialized bandages. After the title defense, he supposedly underwent surgery and should now feel better. But we must be realistic and understand that even in his best condition, Francis wouldn't have defeated Ngannou in striking, let alone talking about Tyson Fury is laughable. Besides, it's hard for me to believe that a 37-year-old fighter, which is how old the African will be at the time of the fight, can suddenly progress so much and gain elite boxing skills during his absence from the UFC. Progress becomes much harder with age, and that applies not only to sports, but to everything in general. Ngannou has the fundamental idea ingrained that he can kill with any strike, and for a long time he relied solely on that. So I doubt he can suddenly completely change and transform stylistically into someone like Anthony Joshua, or even more so, Alexander Usyk. So what does it all come down to? Will the Gypsy King simply dismantle the UFC champion like a child? Most likely, that's exactly what will happen. The problem with this fight is that it's very difficult to see a single aspect in which Ngannou surpasses Fury. Well, perhaps we can attribute physical strength, of which the Cameroonian has a bit more than plenty, and some understanding of the clinch as advantages for him. In MMA, that distance is quite well developed, but in boxing, it's completely different. If Ngannou works on this aspect leading up to the fight, he might surpass the Gypsy King in the clinch, but even that Ngannou will be able to resist in the clinch for some time. But ultimately, he will lose in that aspect as well. Looking at it objectively, I don't see any more advantages for the former UFC champion. He will be several times slower, less technical with poor defense, and on top of that, he has very weak cardio. Memes about Ngannou needing an oxygen tank flooded the internet after his first title fight against Miocic. Since then, the Cameroonian has worked on his endurance and it has indeed improved, but with his muscle mass and fighting style, even lungs the size of the entire arena won't help him from running out of breath. I think the Predator will be active for the first 3, maybe a maximum of 5 rounds, after which he will fade and may even lose by TKO. A clean knockout seems unlikely because his opponent's jaw is truly iron, but I don't think Fury will be concerned about how he finishes his opponent. If I were to assess the chances of both fighters in percentages, I would give 95% in favor of WBC champion Tyson Fury, 4% for an injury to one of the athletes, and 1% in favor of Ngannou. If all the stars align and line up on the very day Ngannou faces the undefeated heavyweight from Britain, maybe he will have a chance at victory, but otherwise it's the most blatant mismatch one can imagine.